Have you ever felt such immense pain in your heart watching how much your PDA, autistic, or high needs child suffers? Maybe you've watched your child desperately want friends, connection, freedom, joy, independence, and then watch their nervous system completely block them from accessing it. Heartbreaking, right? Maybe you've watched them not eat, not sleep, hurt themselves, become trapped in rituals and fear, or apologize for who they are over and over again. And maybe the hardest part is this: you could see how much they are suffering internally while the rest of the world only sees challenging behavior. There is a kind of deep inner pain, this grief that comes with parenting a PDA, autistic, or high needs child that almost nobody talks about: the helplessness, the heartbreak, the guilt, the fear about the future, the pain of watching someone you love suffer while knowing you cannot simply fix it or take it away. And over time, that grief doesn't just stay emotional, it lives in the nervous system, in the body, in your thoughts, in your relationships, in your ability to still feel alive inside yourself. In today's episode, I want to talk about this hidden grief that so many parents carry silently. I want to help you understand why seeing your child suffer feels so overwhelming for you. What gets triggered inside us when we witness our child suffering? Why this grief is so painful and so complex, and how to begin working with it without losing yourself inside it. Because while you cannot take away your child's pain, you can learn how to hold your own heart while you witness theirs. So let's begin. Okay, so for years, I watched my son suffer. Okay, since he left school 7 years ago, his life became smaller and smaller. I watched him eat so little that every meal felt like a battle his body couldn't win. I watched him sleep so little that exhaustion and wired but tired became his baseline. I watched him headbang, hitting himself so hard I feared he'd hurt himself permanently. I watched him destroy things he loved deeply, like his iPad, in moments when the overwhelm became too much to contain. I watched how hard social connection was for him. He wants friends so badly. He wants relationships with his cousins, but he needs so much control over what others do and say that the threat response takes over and people pull away. He wants to leave the house and go places. And although we're going for drives again after years of burnout and being housebound, there is still so much fear living in his body about being out in the world. He is autistic. He has PDA and OCD, which makes everything especially challenging because there are so many rituals that need to be completed just to get through daily life. I watch him up all night, not getting enough sleep, searching for social opportunities, only for people to be unkind to him on social apps. And I see how much he apologizes for himself, the deep shame he carries because of how his challenges affect him and our family and the world around him. All of this breaks my heart. I want so badly to help him, to make things better for him, and I can't. If I push at all, right, to try to help him, then things just go backwards. The pain I feel in my heart when he can't do healthy things for himself or get himself to do the things that he loves is enormous. And it often feels like it's never ending. It's so hard to watch your child suffer. It's so hard to know what they could do to help themselves and watch how they just can't do it. It's so hard to see the yearning and longing in their eyes to be out in the world, only to be taken over by the part of them that feels too scared and stops them in their tracks. So, watching your child suffer is one of the hardest things parents of PDA, autistic, or high needs kids have to endure in this lifetime. Okay, it's not just hard, it's primal pain. It activates something in us that feels unbearable, something ancient, biological, impossible to override. It triggers this helplessness of being a parent who can't fix. this powerlessness of watching someone that you love more than life, more, right? Your child, you love them more than life itself, to watch them struggle and knowing that there is nothing you can do to take it away. There's also this deep grief in realizing that your child doesn't get to have the easier life that others seem to have. Things that come so easily for other children can feel impossibly hard for them. They have to work harder to accomplish things that most people take for granted. And often nobody in the world truly sees how much they're suffering. They only see the challenging, like they only see how challenging their behaviors are. Okay, so as parents, what happens? We absorb so much of our child's pain, their hurt, their fear, their grief, right? Nervous systems are designed to ping with each other. We feel our child's pain as if it is our own. And we can become deeply enmeshed with them, right? Especially mothers, because we are so connected to them intuitively, emotionally, and even biologically. But I know that fathers can feel this too. Their pain becomes our pain to bear, okay? And because of this, many of us never truly feel free to fully live our own lives in the way that we want. I have often felt enormous guilt for wanting to take a vacation, okay? Which we haven't done in 8 years. I crave going on a beach vacation, okay? Like the beach is my place. But I know my son wants that so badly too, and he cannot get himself to do it. So the guilt stops me from going on my own. And I know, okay, I know that deep down I need to fulfill my needs and live my life too. But it's so easy to give up what I want because I don't want to hurt my son further and leave him feeling even more sad that he cannot go too. So this grief is enormous. Okay. And so today is really about this deep and often silent and hidden grief that so many of us parents, right, especially of PDA, autistic, or high needs kids carry. Okay. There's this grief that comes with watching your child suffer, the grief that has no closure, right? No ritual, no clear end. It's ongoing. Okay. This is the grief that no one talks about really. So I want to help you understand what gets triggered in you when you witness your child's pain, why you absorb their pain as your own, okay, and why this grief feels so overwhelming and consuming, how this grief is different from other kinds of grief, and most importantly, how to work with this grief so that it doesn't consume you, right? That pain doesn't take you over. Because unfortunately, we cannot take away our child's suffering, right? This is part of their life experience. But we can learn to hold our own hearts while we witness theirs. Okay. So let's just start by naming what you're witnessing, okay? It's so important to gain awareness of like what you're seeing in front of you and what's causing you this kind of suffering because this isn't abstract, right? This is concrete, daily lived suffering that you see in your child's body and behavior and nervous system and through their eyes. Okay, so first there's this physical suffering that they go through, right? So we witness this physical suffering and that your child is trapped in survival mode. Okay, so what happens? We may watch them restrict eating, right? A lot of our kids can restrict eating, they can restrict sleeping or toileting because their nervous system experiences these basic needs as a demand and therefore a threat. We may watch them engage in self-harm. That is so hard, right? Like headbanging, scratching, or hitting themselves. You may watch them destroy things that they love in moments of overwhelm. You may watch them live in a body that cannot access what it needs even when they desperately want to. Okay, their nervous system gets stuck a lot, and no amount of wanting it to be different makes it change. So you see them know, okay, this is artist part. You see them know what they need, right? Like they know it. They need sleep, they need food, they need calm, they need regulation, they need to do certain things like movement and exercise. You know all the things that can help them and they know. And yet we watch their nervous system refuse to let them access it. And that is devastating to witness as a parent, right? So devastating. Then there's the social suffering we witness, right? So that's the second thing. Your child wants connection so desperately. They want friends, they want to belong, they want relationships, but their nervous system makes it incredibly hard. Okay. So you may watch them need so much control over others that friendships fall apart. You may watch them get hurt online, rejected, misunderstood, or even that happens in person. Okay, you may watch them apologize for themselves over and over again, right? Or even like just push other people away in anger. You may watch them carry shame about how their behavior affects others, and you may watch them long for connection and yet be unable to sustain it. Okay, this loneliness, it's like it's palpable, right? You can feel it, you can taste it, you can see it in their eyes. And you can feel it in your own chest, the ache of watching someone you love be so alone. Okay. Then the third thing that we see is the shrinking life, right? We witness how much their life and ours too shrinks more and more. Okay, so over time, your child's world can become smaller and smaller. So you may watch them become housebound for months or years. You may watch them burn out so deeply that they can't engage in life at all. You may watch them lose access to things that they used to be able to do. You may watch them desperately want to do things and yet still be unable to get themselves to do it. Okay, life doesn't expand, it contracts. And you are watching it happen in real time. And that is so hard. Then, number four, the inner suffering that you could see in their eyes. This is so hard for me, right? This is the fourth thing. You could just see the suffering in their eyes. This is the part that breaks you. They yearn, like my son, he yearns to be out in the world, right? The longing for ease and normalcy and friendship and connection, the part that wants to, and then the part that can't. You see both at once. And you know, in a way that no one else does, how much they are suffering internally. The world sees them as challenging behavior, and you see pain. You see a nervous system trapped in survival. You see a child who desperately wants things that they cannot access. Okay. And being one of the only people who truly sees how much they are suffering makes the grief even heavier. Okay. It's not easy to watch your child suffer, it triggers so much inside of you. Okay. So let's talk about what gets triggered in you as you watch all these different ways that your child suffers, okay? Because this isn't just empathy, okay? This is nervous system activation, and it touches multiple wounds at once, okay? And this is what makes it so hard. So, number one is that it triggers this helplessness and powerlessness, right? You can't fix it. You can't make it better. You can't take their pain away. You can't control it. Okay. If you push, things go backwards. If you don't push, they stay stuck. You feel trapped in your own inability to help the person you love the most. Okay. This is a core wound, right? That helplessness and powerlessness. It's a core wound that often comes from our childhood that gets activated and compounded when we feel like we cannot fix this situation. And that core wound is I am powerless and I have no control. Okay. And this is one of the deepest wounds that can live inside the nervous system. And watching your child suffer, it presses on this directly. Okay. So, research on parents of children with complex care needs shows that chronic stress, ongoing caregiving demands, feelings of helplessness, grief, and prolonged survival mode can significantly contribute to parental burnout, emotional exhaustion, and depression. Okay. So, you're not imagining this. The experience is real and is one of the hardest emotional experiences a human can endure. Okay. Then the second thing that gets triggered is this primal fear that every parent carries. Okay. Underneath everything is the question that haunts you. Will my child be okay? Will their future look, what will their future look like? Will they ever have ease, joy, connection, or independence? Okay. What happens when I'm not here anymore? Right. So this really goes beyond worry. This is existential fear. Okay. And it lives in the body as this constant low level panic, dread, bracing, hypervigilance, and anticipatory fear. Okay. You wake up with it, you go to bed with it, it hums in the background of everyday life. Okay. And no amount of reassurance fully takes it away because you are living the reality that proves the fear is not irrational. Okay. So it's really about learning to work with that fear and also learning to change the meanings around it. But the third thing that gets triggered, okay, is this grief of the loss that we experience. Okay. You are grieving actively and ongoing and every single day. Okay. So here's what you are grieving. You're grieving the loss of the life that you thought that they would have, right? That you imagined for them. You're grieving the loss of ease, right? Watching things that come easily to others be impossibly hard for your child. You're grieving the loss of experiences that you imagined for them, like school, friendships, activities, milestones that haven't been reached yet. Okay, you're grieving the loss of the future you envision for them, and you're comparing their life to others and feeling the sharp edge of that difference. Okay, so researcher Pauline Boss calls this ambiguous loss. It's grief that has no closure because the person is still here. Okay, but what you hoped for them is not here. Okay. And ambiguous loss is one of the hardest kinds of grief to process because it has no clear beginning or end. It just continues. Okay, then the fourth thing that gets triggered is this guilt and self-blame. So somewhere in the back of your mind, the questions loop. Did I cause this? Should I have done something differently? Am I making it worse? If I were a better parent, could I help them more? Okay. Even when you know intellectually that this isn't your fault, the guilt still lives in your body. Because when your child suffers, every part of you wants to believe there must be something you could do to change it. And then there is another layer of guilt in here, okay, in terms of the guilt that gets triggered. And this is the guilt of living your own life, right? Like for my son, he's been in burnout for years. And I've had this guilt of like just being out there, living my life, doing the things that I really want to do. Like, how can I go on vacation when he can't? How can I enjoy something when he's suffering? Like, if I live my life fully, I feel like I'm abandoning him, right? So then you start to shrink your own life to match theirs because anything else feels unbearable. Okay, you give up experiences, you cancel plans, you stop dreaming about what you want because how can you have what they can't have? How can you feel joy when they're in pain? So you carry their suffering as your own and slowly stop fully living yourself. Okay, the fifth thing that gets triggered is this enmeshment. It's called enmeshment, where their pain becomes your pain, right? There's no separation between you and them. Their pain becomes yours. And as parents, especially mothers, we are biologically and neurologically wired to attune to our child. Okay, but I want to say this can very much happen for fathers and adoptive parents too. Okay, so research on empathy and parental bonding shows that when we witness our child suffering, our own nervous system responds as if the pain is happening to us. Okay, mirror neurons in the brain fire when we see our child in distress and it creates this visceral embodied experience of their pain in our own body so we feel them, right? And over time, the boundary between our emotional state and theirs can become blurred. Okay. And that's what's called enmeshment. So you absorb their emotions and their nervous system states and their pain. And when they suffer, you suffer. When they can't do something, you feel it in your own body. You lose the boundary between their experience and yours. And then over time, this becomes really exhausting and depleting and destabilizing for you. Okay, so those are the 5 things that can get triggered in this experience. And it's important to understand what could get triggered in you when you're watching your child suffer. Because when you have, the awareness and clarity, then it can help you to work with what's getting triggered inside of you instead of being completely overtaken by it. Okay, so I know from my own experience that healing past childhood wounds through trauma reprocessing types of approaches has helped me immensely, okay, immensely to decrease the pain that I feel today around my child's suffering. Okay, so the past can often compound the present, especially if you've had early relational or attachment wounds. Okay. But I'm not denying that, like, what we feel in the present is real and valid. Okay. Because it is. Like, I'm simply saying that it helps immensely to not become so flooded in the present moment with their suffering when you can reprocess past traumas that are also being triggered in the present and are compounding this present moment triggering. Okay. But the reality is that this experience truly does carry enormous grief. Okay. So let's understand this grief next, why it's so complex, and really how to work with it, because we need to process it on a regular basis, right? So that we don't lose ourselves inside of it, or we don't end up with a nervous system that gets stuck in survival. Okay. So it's important to understand the different aspects of grief, which we're going to get into now, because many parents don't realize just how much they're carrying emotionally, mentally, physically, neurologically, right? So we want to name these different experiences. We want to make them more explicit and bring them into our awareness so that it can help bring clarity to us and validate to us why this feels so hard, okay? So the first reason why this grief can feel complex is because it's ambiguous grief, okay? And what this means is that, like, your child is here, right? They're alive and they're with you, and yet you are grieving the losses, right? You're grieving what isn't. You're grieving what can't be. You're grieving what was lost, right? What you thought could be and what isn't now. So Pauline Boss, who coined the term ambiguous loss, she describes it as a loss that occurs without closure or clear understanding. Okay, so this is grief without resolution. There's no ritual for this, right? There's no funeral, no clear end point. It just continues and it goes on and on. So it's really important that we recognize that and see that and work with it. Okay, so number two, it's disenfranchised grief, disenfranchised grief. Okay. And what this means is that most people don't see it, right? No one acknowledges it. You can't talk about it openly without fear of judgment. At least most of us don't, right? Because your child is alive, right? So it feels like, why are you grieving? So disenfranchise, I can't say this word. Disenfranchised grief is grief that is not socially recognized or validated. Okay. And research shows that this kind of grief is especially isolating because there is no collective understanding or support around it, like there is with, like, regular grief when someone, dies. So many parents carry this grief silently and alone. Okay. And then number three, it's layered grief. Okay. You're not just grieving one thing, you're grieving many things at once. You're grieving your child's suffering. You're grieving your own life and how hard it is. You're grieving the loss of ease, belonging, freedom, and normalcy for both you and your child. You're grieving the future you imagine for both you and your child. You're grieving the parent you thought you'd be, the experiences you thought you'd share together with your child. Okay. And each layer, it adds weight, right? And they don't resolve separately, they all exist together. Okay, number four, the grief comes in waves. Okay, sometimes you're functioning, sometimes you're hopeful, sometimes you're okay. And then something happens, a missed milestone, okay, maybe even a regression, a moment of suffering, a comparison, a reminder of how hard things are for them. And then the grief crashes over you again. Okay, you never fully know when it will hit, right? It just hits and it can hit hard. And then number five is no one truly sees their suffering. Okay, the world sees our kids first and foremost as challenging behavior, Professionals may see defiance or rigidity or anxiety or control. Family members, they often see it as, oh, they're just difficult, they're too much, or they're spoiled. Okay, but you see pain. You see a nervous system trapped in survival. You see the shame they carry. You see the longing in their eyes. You see how hard they are trying internally. And being one of the only people who truly sees their suffering makes the grief even heavier because it can feel like no one fully understands what you are carrying and what they are carrying. Okay. As you can see, there are so many aspects to this grief. Okay. And this pain in your heart that you carry for your child, that you feel when your child suffers. Okay. This is why it's so complex. Okay. And then there's the cost of carrying this grief alone. Okay. If this grief has nowhere to go, okay, what happens? It doesn't just sit quietly inside you, right? It's in your body, it's in your nervous system, it's in your relationships, it's in your life. It affects everything. Okay, so when the grief stays trapped, there are a few things that happen. Number one is it lives in the body as tension, pain, exhaustion, and heaviness, right? So research on trauma and also somatic experiencing modality of therapy, they show that emotions that are not processed through the body often become stored in the nervous system and the body. Okay, so this can show up so if we don't process this grief and this inner pain, it could show up as chronic tension, fatigue, shutdown, right? Total exhaustion, wanting to check out, numbing out, headaches, body pain, illness, and heaviness in the body. So the body carries what the heart cannot process alone. Okay. Then the second thing is that the grief, when it's not processed, it can become numbness, depression, and shutdown. Okay, the nervous system cannot hold this much ongoing pain forever. So eventually it starts protecting you by shutting down. And what happens in the shutdown state of the nervous system, the dorsal vagal shutdown state, it's trying to numb all the pain. It's trying to numb all the pain so that you could stop feeling fully. Okay, but if you stop feeling the pain, then you also stop feeling all the positive emotions in life too, right? You become more emotionally numb, disconnected, flat. This is where depression lives, right? And you move through life on autopilot, okay? Then the other thing that happens when you don't process grief is that it can turn into resentment, right? It's hard to sit in grief and then to sit in shutdown. So then your system shoots you into sympathetic fight flight and it turns into this resentment towards your child, towards your partner, towards yourself, towards the world, right? The unfairness of this world. And not because you want to feel this way, but because grief with nowhere to go often hardens into bitterness and resentment, right? And then from a nervous system perspective, we don't want to sit in that heavy shutdown state for long. So then the nervous system will try to push you back into fight flight, and then you'll cycle back and forth, resentment, grief, pain, resentment, grief, pain. Okay. Then the fourth thing is that when the grief is not processed, is that it really keeps you trapped in enmeshment. Okay. So you can't separate your pain from theirs. So both nervous systems stay stuck, right? You absorb their suffering, and they feel your suffering too. Okay. Because that's how nervous systems are designed. They can feel yours too. And then everyone stays trapped in survival together. Okay. And then the fifth thing that happens when you don't process grief is that it fuels self abandonment. Okay. You stop living your own life because it feels wrong to have anything that they can't have, right? You shrink yourself, you lose yourself, your needs, your dreams, your aliveness, and over time, you disappear inside this caregiving. And then number six is that it makes it harder to access presence, joy, and hope, which I mentioned before, right? If you don't process the grief, it can become so heavy that it blocks access to moments of connection and safety and joy or hope. Okay. So you may be physically present, but emotionally and internally you are drowning. Okay. So this grief really needs to move. This inner pain needs to be worked with and it needs to move. Okay. But grief is one of the hardest emotions to be with. So how do we work with it? without letting it consume us, take us over, and feel like we're drowning in it, right? It's so heavy, and it can often feel like that if we allow ourselves to feel it, it'll never end. Okay. But the problem is that if we don't work with it, the nervous system stays stuck in survival. Okay. Processing grief is really not about getting over it. It's not about bypassing the pain. It's not about pretending that things are okay when they aren't. Okay. It's really about learning to have tolerance and capacity to be with this grief, to hold space for it, to let it release from the body instead of collapsing inside of it, right? So, how to feel it without losing yourself within it. So, that's what we're going to talk about next. And how do you do that? So the number one, so there's a few steps I'm going to walk you through. Okay. So the first thing is that you name the grief and you let yourself feel it, right? So you can say out loud, I am grieving. This is grief, right? I'm not failing. I'm not weak. This is not dramatic. I am grieving and this makes sense. Okay. So there's power in naming what this actually is, right? Because until you name it, it stays shapeless and it consumes you. Okay, so research on emotional processing shows that naming emotions helps regulate the nervous system and creates more space around overwhelming experiences, right? It's learning to name it and be with it. And grief needs to move through the body. Okay. It cannot stay trapped forever. Okay. But that doesn't mean you have to feel all of it at once, right? Sometimes it can feel like there's so much of it that it's going to overtake you. So, this is where something that's called titration becomes important, right? So, this is a concept from somatic experiencing therapy that was developed by Dr. Peter Levine. And titration means that you feel a little bit and then you come back to safety. You feel a little bit, you come back to feeling safe and being on the outside. You feel a little bit on the inside, and you come back again to safety and the present moment on the outside. So you don't necessarily dive into the grief and stay there until you drown in it. Okay. If you have a lot of intolerance for being with this kind of pain, just work with it slowly in little bits. You touch it, you allow it, then you do what's called resourcing yourself, come out of it, feel safety in the present environment, get busy doing something else. Okay. So a lot of this work is about going inside, feeling in little bits, coming out, orienting to the room, breathing, grounding, feeling your feet in the present, looking for safety. And let your body process the grief in small doses. Okay. What I like to do, what helps me a lot, is sometimes I put on a sad song, okay, because music is is a safety cue for me and supports my nervous system. So sometimes I put on a sad song that I love to support me to process the grief, okay? I allow myself like a song or two to feel the grief and support myself with self-compassion. And then I come back to the present and connect to something I appreciate in the room around me. Okay, then I walk around, come out of it, and then I move forward with my day. Okay, so I process it in little bits that way. Okay, for the longest time, I used to process it in my car. It was the only place I could process it, just parked with the music on, and I would do it that way. Okay, but processing grief can look different for everyone, right? So sometimes grief, it needs tears. Sometimes it needs holding and containment, or sometimes it needs movement, right? Like walking in nature or rocking while processing the grief. Like that helps me a lot to keep movement on board so I don't freeze with it. Sometimes it needs like screaming into a pillow or making these sounds to let out your agony. Sometimes processing grief is also letting out the anger that comes with it, the anger at the injustice, the unfairness, right? And letting that out in safe ways, right? Maybe anger and tears at the same time. Okay. And sometimes it's just resting and holding yourself with compassion. Okay. The body needs somewhere for the grief to go. Okay. So the important thing is to stay present and be with the grief instead of totally consumed by it. Okay. Then the second thing is to really separate your pain from your child's pain. So over time, like this is part of the work, right? Like your child's suffering is very real, right? And it is theirs, okay? It is part of their human experience on this earth. just as our experience is our own. So, can that be okay? Can that be like, okay, this is a part of life, it's okay for them to have pain, but then you can witness it, you can support it, and you can hold space for it. So they're not alone in it, right? They're not alone in it. You can be there with them, but then you don't have to carry it for them, right? Absorbing it, it doesn't help them and it only depletes you. So this is differentiation, right? This is ability to stay deeply connected to someone, giving them the support they need while still maintaining the boundary between their experience and yours. Okay, so practice reminding yourself this is their pain. I can care without becoming consumed by it. I can love them without absorbing all of their suffering into my body. I can witness their struggle without losing myself inside it. Okay, this doesn't mean you stop caring, it means you stop drowning. And for some of us, we may need to do some of this boundary work, right? Early trauma processing work around boundary work that connects to our early childhood and attachment wounds in order to help us with this differentiation process. Okay, I know this is something I had to do to help me separate from my own child so that I could bring my strength and compassion to him to support him, right? And also be able to support myself. Okay, so the third thing is to work with the guilt without letting it define your life. Okay, the guilt is real, right? And it will come up again and again. Okay, so, but ask yourself, okay, this is a good question to ask yourself. Does my suffering help my child? Does shrinking my life to match theirs actually support them? Okay, or does it end up teaching that life stops when things are hard, that joy is not allowed when someone you love is struggling, that your needs don't matter, that aliveness must be sacrificed? Okay, what if, like, one of the most powerful things your child could witness is someone who can hold grief, okay, and still choose life? Okay, someone who can still laugh and connect, travel, rest, experience joy, pursue meaning, and stay alive inside themselves. Okay, even if you have this grief too. Okay, your aliveness does not take away from them. In many ways, it may help show them that life can still be lived even in the middle of struggle. Okay. And then the fourth thing you can do is not carry this grief alone. Okay. This kind of grief often needs witnesses. Okay. You need people who see what you see, understand this kind of parenting. They don't minimize it, right? They don't try to fix it and they don't judge your grief. Okay. Research on grief recovery shows that one of the most healing experiences for human beings is being witnessed in pain. Okay. There's so many cultures that do like rituals around this. Like I wish we had this in our culture, right? That we witness each other's pain, right? We don't rescue each other. Okay. It's not about rescuing each other. It's about witnessing. So you need people who can say, I see you. This is incredibly hard. You're not crazy for feeling this way. You're not alone. Okay. For some of us, that may be like a therapist, right? That might be the only person, but you can also do this for yourself, right? You become the witness for yourself and provide this to yourself, right? And we can also create these rituals for grief, right? To help grief release. Okay, so you can write, you can journal, you can cry, you can light a candle, sit in nature. Nature is a great place to do like these rituals of imagining the grief leaving your body and going into the earth. Okay, you can write letters that you never send. You can move your body, right? You can create these rituals in these moments where grief has permission to exist instead of constantly being pushed away. Okay, you can feel it and you can release it. Okay. And then the fifth thing is that you can do is to hold both grief and love. And this is a real practice, right? Practice in holding two things at once. Okay. Because this is the paradox of parenting a child who suffers a lot, right? You can grieve deeply and still feel immense love for them. You can ache for what your child struggles with and still see beauty of who they are. Okay. You can carry sorrow, feel their sorrow, and still experience moments of joy, connection, laughter, and meaning, and both can exist together. So, can that be okay? Can it be okay that you can hold both grief and love and both can exist together? Okay, this is not an either or, and it's really a both and. So, you do not have to wait for the grief to disappear before allowing yourself to feel anything else. Because remember, this grief is ongoing. So it's good to practice holding both grief and both love. Okay. And then the sixth thing is really redefining what it means to help. Okay. And then trust the unfolding. Okay. We cannot fix our child's suffering, right? But what can we do? We can hold space without absorbing. Okay, we can stay more regulated so they have safety near them, so we can support them. We can witness without constantly trying to change them, right? We can love them exactly as they are, right? We can trust that they have their own timeline and path, and we can remain present even when you cannot make things better. Okay, so sometimes the most healing thing a parent can do is stop trying to rescue and simply be with their child. Okay, not fixing, right? Not fixing, just be with. And not fixing doesn't mean you're giving up. It means understanding that your presence, okay, being fully present with them and allowing what is in this moment, it matters deeply. It's deeply regulating for everyone. And while you cannot fully control the future, you also cannot fully predict it. Okay? You don't know, like, you really don't know what healing and growth and maturity and support and insight or change that may unfold over time. You don't know what the future holds. Okay, so trust does not mean saying, okay, everything will be okay. Trust means that I can hold uncertainty without letting it destroy me. Okay, it means that I can stay present without needing to control the ending. It means that I can continue showing up even when I don't know what comes next. Okay. So this is really about holding your heart while you hold theirs. Okay. I truly believe, okay, if you know me and you've listened to my other podcasts, you know me. I will always say this. I truly believe that this journey of parenting a child who suffers so much is so much better supported when we can connect to a bigger meaning and purpose to it all. Okay. And often that purpose, it centers around learning and growth for both yourself and your child. Okay. Because I don't believe that all this pain is for nothing. Okay. I don't believe that we're just victims of circumstance. It feels that way at times when we're in our survival system, but that's simply not the truth, right? So, what if this grief, okay, as painful as it is also changing you in some positive way? Okay, not because your child needed to suffer for you to grow, but because being asked to love someone through this level of suffering transforms a person. Okay, so maybe this grief, it's cracking you open to like this depth of love that you didn't even know existed. Maybe it's teaching you to surrender, to have more presence, more acceptance. Maybe it's breaking down old ideas of success and control and productivity and normalcy that don't serve you anymore. Okay, maybe it's connecting you to other parents in profound ways. Maybe it's revealing your own resilience and capacity to hold hard things. Okay, that is a huge one for me, right? That's a huge gain. I know I can hold hard things, and that feels really good. Even if things are hard, I know that I can hold those hard things, right? And this doesn't necessarily make the pain worth it, okay? But it does mean that this experience is shaping you deeply and that it does have meaning. So there's some gain to this. There is some gain, okay? You are being asked to love without fixing, witness without controlling, grieve without collapsing, stay alive while carrying pain, hold sorrow and hope at the same time. My friends, this is sacred work, okay? And it is some of the hardest work a human being can ever do. You cannot take away your child's suffering, right? But you can learn to hold your own heart while you witness theirs. You can grieve without being consumed by it. You can feel the heartbreak without letting it define every moment in your life. You can slowly create space for your own needs, your own aliveness, your own life too. Not because their suffering doesn't matter, but because you matter too. Okay, watching your child suffer is one of the hardest things that you will ever do. And you do not have to do it perfectly. You do not have to carry it alone. Okay. You do not have to have all the answers. Some days, just continuing to show up with love is enough. Some days, simply holding your own heart while you hold theirs is the bravest thing that you can do. And that brings the tears to my eyes right now. And I want you to know that that is more than enough. So if this spoke to you, if this touched your heart, if this helped you in any way, please do comment, please do share. I love to read your comments, and please share with another parent that might need this message too. Thank you for being here.